I think it's got a bit of a misfire.
What's going on, guys? It's Wes here from Coastal Budget Builds. Today I want to give you guys a little bit of a rundown on what I've been doing with the LS swap. I ended up pulling the engine out of the truck, as you saw in the last video. We were just getting started with it, so I got the engine out. We got it torn down. I'll show you guys a little walk around of what we've done so far. Also, I've taken the stock harness out of the truck and converted it to a standalone harness because it's a lot easier for me to take a standalone harness and integrate that into my 97 GMC as opposed to trying to fuse the two harnesses together right off the hop. So I'll show you guys the harness I've done and the motor, and if you guys have any questions on how I did the how I did the wiring or anything, feel free to comment below. lt1swap.com is where I got all the information on how to do the harness. It was a bit of a pain in the ass. There's quite a bit to it. You get overwhelmed pretty easily getting into it. Like, I had to take a couple day break because it was just like there's pins you gotta pull, and I mean I made the mistake of when I took the harness apart, I took all the looms off with all the branches off and everything, so I made a huge mess. It was just a pile of wires I had to go through, and I had to go through it a few times to actually get it organized properly and trace every wire from the PCM back to the sensor to make sure that I have everything in line and still there. I eliminated everything from the AC to the EGR. I basically have a box of wires that I eliminated. I'll share a link in the description below about the where to get the information on how to do the harness, because I can explain a little bit to you, but honestly it's my first time doing it, so some of the videos out there are quite a bit better than what my explanations could be. But since it's fresh in my head and I just did it, like I said, I might be able to guide you in the right direction if you get stuck doing it. So I will show you right now the motor and the harness, and then we'll just keep on building. So here's the harness I made with the factory intake manifold. I've heard a lot of things about the LS truck intake, and that it's actually not a bad intake to have depending on your application. For me, because it's going in a truck, I decided I'm going to keep the factory intake because it's good for producing low end torque, so that's kind of what I need for the truck anyways. So basically, here's the harness. It's not the prettiest harness ever, but what I did is that box of wires, this whole box right here, all this is what I took out. Like, this is just insane. And this whole pile of junk right here was all part of the engine harness. Now, actually there's a couple light bulbs in there that aren't part of the engine harness, but you get the point. So basically that pile of shit was mixed in here. Now that everything's all labeled and easier to understand, it's going to be a lot easier to put in the truck. What I had to do is I had to take the pins off the back of the computer here and trace them to every single sensor. So all the injector wires, everything's been labeled, like injector, whatever that one is, blah blah blah, alternator. I kept the speed sensor for the speedometer and the front O2s. I eliminated the rear O2s because I don't need those. Those are for emissions crap. But yeah, it's all laid out pretty nice. It's a lot easier to understand once you have it all labeled after it was all taken apart. The other thing too is, like, this section of wires right here, basically these are all just power. So this is power to the computer, this is your fuel pump relay, this is for your OBD2 port. Most of these go to power to power up the computer. Other than that, I'm obviously going to have to get the ECU flashed, but I plan on buying HP tuners, so that should be a cakewalk with that software. Then over here, I've got this little bundle of wires here, which is kind of confusing, but I mean, it isn't really that confusing once you get into it. There's all of these are power. So these are all ignition sources. So you have your coils, your O2 sensors, your starter solenoid, your injectors. All of these have to be fused ignition source. So once these are all fused ignition and all those are powered up, then basically that's it. Power there, and then this engine should technically run. The other problem I'm going to have is with the VAT system. Now, I've looked online, there's all kinds of different ways of eliminating the VATs by putting in a resistor and doing all that stuff, but I think with HP tuners there's a way to just disable it, so I think I'm going to do that because I'm going to need HP tuners for when I add the turbo and all that stuff. Also, I made this little fuse box here. This thing's actually kind of hilarious. It's literally a fuse box that was cut off an old Chevy. Let's see if I have it over here. It's funny. Let's see. Yeah, right here. We literally cut this fuse box out of an old Chevy truck and then sliced a section of it off. And yeah, epoxied it to a piece of aluminum. And then these wires, I changed the pins so that the colors are similar. And this is all you need for fuses for these wires. So even though there's more than one wire for like injectors, for example, like there's 2 wires here that need power, but that's just like that's probably like 2, 4, and 6, and 8. And then 1 and 3 and so on and so forth. These will get connected all together and then hooked to a fuse. The reason you want to do that, and instead of just taking all these wires and bunching them together and hooking them to a power source, is if you blow one fuse, you're going to short everything out. It could possibly short out any sensor that these are connected to. It could fry. So that's why you got to make sure that you keep them separated and keep them all individually fused. But that's pretty much it for the intake and the wiring. It's going to be pretty nerve-wracking putting it in the truck because I have to keep my stock ECU that I have in my actual green Chevy. So I'm going to have to combine the two somehow. That's going to be the next process. So yeah, that's pretty much for the intake. Now I will take you over to the motor and show you what we've done there. So guys, here's the motor. We tore it all apart, started cleaning it up a little bit. There's one thing I want you guys to know if you guys are doing a swap like this. I've had a few people ask me about the differences between a 5.3 and a 4.8. Now what you can do is you can take a scope and stick it down the cylinder holes if you don't have the heads off, like if you're buying a used motor and you want to know what the difference is. The pistons in a 5.3 only, sorry, I gotta make sure I tell you this, only with the truck blocks. This is very important. The iron blocks, the truck LS motor has dished pistons in the 5.3, okay? So if the pistons are dished, it's a 5.3. If they're flat, then it's a 4.8. That's a big telling sign when you're actually looking at the motor. Yeah, so that's just kind of something you guys should know if you're planning on doing a swap like this. The other thing, we got the heads off and everything. I started cleaning them up a little bit. I still got to order gaskets and stuff for it. A friend of mine who is a mechanic told me that I should never use one of these wheels to clean the head. Now, because it's aluminum heads, I went and used it before he told me not to use it. So I don't know if I messed up the heads or not, but we'll see if it blows a head gasket. I've got the gasket kit and the head studs and everything on order. Also, I'm going to be doing an Little John Motors cam, stage 2 turbo cam. So that'll be pretty sweet once it's all in there and everything. I also want to show you guys something under the motor as well. So on the underside of the motor, once you have it apart, One thing that's very important if you're going to be ordering parts for an LS motor is to know what kind of reluctor gear you have. Now, if your reluctor gear looks like this one here, this is a 24 tooth reluctor gear. Make sure that you know which one that is when you start to order parts for your engine, because that is very important to know to make sure that you got the right parts. There's a 24 tooth and a 58 tooth. The 58 tooth obviously has more. You'll be able to see that they have more in between here, but this is a 24 tooth reluctor gear. Other than that, yeah, this is pretty much where I'm at. I've got it taken apart completely. The heads are all off, everything's all off, ready to go. So now I'm just waiting on parts to put her back together. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure that you subscribe if you want to see more. If you want to see more detailed videos of the build, let me know. And like I said about the wiring, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below. And yeah, I'll keep you updated. Take care, guys.